Hello, everyone. This is Marita, one who catches lightning, with the Path of Ish podcast, Walking with Our Shadow, where we share ancient indigenous teachings of remembrance, all so we can walk and learn how to walk a path of radical self-love. I'm happy to invite us all back into the circle as we continue this conversation with technology. And today we have one of our favorite guests, Rose. Rose, how are you?
I'm doing okay today, thank you.
Beautiful. We also have a little puppy here with us, so you might hear them in the background. And that would be Sitara. Right, Sitara? A little boy. So as we continue our conversation with technology, let's just kind of dive into, like, if you had to define technology. We all have this stories about technology, or when kind of technology shifted and you know, in costumbres and customs and in generations. And so let's talk a little bit about your definition of technology first, and then also kind of how you've seen that change as time has gone by, your influence of technology and all of that.
Well, I think there's lots of definitions of technology. I think about technology as being something that could be defining any type of tool or innovation or, kind of strategy in a way. But I don't feel like that's usually what people mean when they talk about it, obviously. I do like to keep the definition actually pretty broad. So for me, context matters. Sometimes people talk about indigenous technologies, and mystical technologies and all of these things. And I'm not talking about that from like strictly like a new age lens. I mean, like, I like the idea of expanding the definition to be a little bit less focused on modern day tech, tech that's based around rare metals and, circuit boards and thinking machines and all of this, and just really expand the definition, because I think it creates a little bit more space actually for what it is and our relationship with it and what's included and what's not. And that creates a lot more possibility for me.
Beautiful. I love expanding things and opening things up instead of just sticking to that one definition that I think a lot of people are modern living considers what technology is, right? The iPhones in our hands, the electronics and stuff like that. So tell me a little bit about how you grew up. Was technology a big part of your life? Has it changed? Tell us a little bit about that.
Technology has changed massively during my life. You and I talk about this a lot, but I'll say it here for the sake of the people who are listening, which is we're both we share a couple things around this, which I think is really interesting. We're both part of this little tiny, little wedge generation around the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s, where we were exposed to technology and we had a relationship with it. Specifically like computers, home computers, computers in schools, all of that sort of thing. And then at the same time, like, the internet was not widespread. We didn't grow up on social media. There was we were gone for hours and our parents didn't know where we were. But you and I both had fathers that were deeply connected to computer technology. And I think that that's really interesting through line between both of our stories, because it means in an interesting way, we had also potentially different relationship with computer technology than maybe other people of our little tiny sliver generation. My relationship with technology has changed, with that particular type of technology has certainly changed over the years. Now I feel like it's difficult to, sort of function without it, especially given the fact that I work online. My community is worldwide, But I often think about what would happen if suddenly, it all failed. Like, what would my life become? What would my skill sets be? What would I do for money or trade or exchange if suddenly all of these technological advances having to do specifically with the internet, all of the knowledge that is immediately available at our fingertips, all the ways that it connects us, if all that was gone, what would I be left with? So I think it's an interesting codependent relationship. That that's what I'll say for now, I guess, because it's like the one that I know is not great for me in certain ways, but is awesome for me in other ways, and connects me to people that I love and opportunities and experiences, and at the same time is like the gateway to the somewhat debilitating like hellscape of social media. I don't hate it, but it's wild out there, how it really distorts community perception, self-perception. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Now, we're living in a time where part of kind of technology, and we'll start narrowing a little bit of the scope here when we're talking about it, is there's this energy of advancement. And I feel like we're at that point where it's never enough. Like it's not fast enough. There's not enough of it. And, we saw that during, the pandemic, the microchips that needed to be created to make cars, like no one could get to them. And then there were no cars, since people started buying so many cars at that time. And so again, we're at this point that it's not fast enough. And I kind of want to talk about that because, I remember when, back when my father, loved computers, and they told him it was a stupid thing to go into. They told him, like, you're ridiculous. Like, just go be a doctor. And he was at the forefront of artificial intelligence. That's what he did his doctorate in. And in he had like 7 masters and other things. But I remember I was in like
The number keeps going up.
Probably. I think he is getting more on the other side. His dream was to get a PhD. He wanted 2 more PhDs. That's how he wanted to retire. One was in quantum physics, and the other one was in something. Anyways, I'm sure he's getting it right now. But I remember I was like in 2nd and 3rd grade, and I had to do this report, and my dad was like, "Just have the computer make the circle." And I'm like, "What?" And then he's like, "You do this, and it took like days to program like this thing to do it. And then we'd have to go pick it up." And I'm like, I could have just like literally taken the bottom of a cup and traced it and be done. Yeah. Well, we're not in those times now, but let's talk about again that energy of never enough with technology.
Well, a few things spring to mind. Number one, sometimes there are still really simple things that are very hard to do with computer technology. Yeah. I mean, maybe not for everybody, but if you are not an expert in certain areas and I remember, because part of my undergrad, I spent doing graphic design and a lot of digital, computer imaging type stuff. And sometimes like the shortcuts took way longer than if I had just started from scratch, right? So I think that, first of all, I think there can be some illusions there around like how simple things really are and how well they really turn out. And, how effective all these shortcuts are or not. But I also think it's just like, okay, so the other thing that immediately came to mind for me, for example, is there's such an illusion in modernity, like across modernity, that these technological advances make everything simpler and faster and, more efficient and more effective. And to some degree, it's true to some degree, if we're only measuring parts of what's happening, right? I mean, that's why, that's technological advances have changed the shape of politics. They've changed the shape of manufacturing. Huge portions of the continental United States have like gone, they don't have jobs anymore because so many things have become mechanized. At the turn of the, 19th to 20th century, around that time, a huge proportion of people were farmers. Almost nobody is farmers anymore because large scale farming is mechanized. And it's become harder and harder to be able to afford to be a farmer, but when you're, competing with like that large scale agriculture. But then there's also this part of it that's like very illusory because, for example, we live where we live. We live on an island. It's very hard to get good internet service here. Our water goes off. Our power goes off. Sometimes it can take like several months of just like making phone calls and going into offices to just try to get an appointment, like a doctor's appointment for an x-ray. Months and months. I'll go online and order something to be shipped because, in this like day and age, it's so simple. You just hop on your computer and you order something to be shipped. And then it goes missing. And then I try to get on the website and like the chat function doesn't work. So I have to like go to a different browser and do all these different things. And then they say that the package was delivered, but it was like, there's just all of these funny ways that we think it works. And it creates a space for higher expectations on people. Because, well, isn't that so simple? Isn't this so fast? Isn't everything in your life just so like instant now? When in fact, a lot of the time it's not. It is definitely different. The amount of things that I have access to in my life are insanely different, right? The world has changed incredibly, but not for everybody, number one. Many people on the planet don't have access to the internet. They can't have groceries delivered to them. They can't have anything mailed to, they can't even get mail, okay? They can't get running water. Like the illusion of technological advance is, it can create a pressure that now everybody's expected to perform as though everything else in their life is instantaneous when it's not. And that's been one of the interesting things about what you're talking about for me, living where we live. And the last place we lived was kind of not quite exactly the same, but still similar in certain ways. We could drive for 5 minutes and see San Francisco, and we could barely get streaming video service at our house. And, people just assume, they assume that things have become so fast and efficient and technology has gone so far. But then that creates even more pressure on people to be more productive. Right? Like a lot of the things that I'm seeing online right now about artificial intelligence, which I'm just calling it that because it's being called that, when in fact, like a lot of it is not artificial intelligence, but what people are calling AI, everything is like, you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by somebody who knows how to do your job better with AI. And they just want everybody to be more and more productive. And if you look at I was taking this economics class, which was about wealth and poverty. And it was like, look, here's a graph of human productivity. And I was just like, holy shit. Like it just, and there was no conversation about this graph, by the way, like how it just keeps going up and up and up. At a certain point, like people aren't going to be okay anymore in that graph. And I think we're already there, right? Capitalism is squeezing people, whatever you want to call it, the way we are doing economics, the way we are doing political economics, the way we are creating things, it's squeezing people so hard. It's squeezing the planet so hard. We've still got a little ways potentially before it totally collapses, but that's when I think about the more, I think about how, like, I think at a certain point that just doesn't work anymore. It's just kind of crumbling.
You know, as you were saying this, two things sprung to mind. And the first one that I want to kind of like talk about is this idea of access and sameness. It's almost like there's this weird illusion that technology, the internet, computers, all make us all the same, right? Like we all should be living in this world. We assume, and I remember having a lot of conversations with people around the world, and unless you have those conversations with people, and it's not even like different economic backgrounds of just where you live and what access is. It's like there's this creation of sameness and this illusion that everyone is living in this lane of technology. And there's like, when I remember telling someone that it took me 2 days to upload something. And then I got to, I remember I was traveling and I got to Colorado, and the minute that I landed, they had 5G and it uploaded in like 20 seconds. I was like,
Yeah.
white man's magic, what's happening here? And they're used to that pace. They, when people are living at a certain pace, they think everyone lives at that pace. So how can we make space? We began this podcast talking about how can we make space with the word technology to look at it in a different way, right? How is there a way to widen people's lenses when it comes to this idea of like, oh, we're all going to be the same, or technology is going to make us all the quote the same. We're going to have the same access to things, which we know is never true.
Yeah, it's how do we widen? How do we make space? I guess it depends on why. Like, why are we trying to make space? Because whether space is made or not, there will be difference. There just will be. I mean, I really appreciate some people talk about human beings and where we are right now and really talk about how we're not just human anymore. We have plastic in our bodies.
Metal.
We have like microplastics through our entire bodies.
Oh, yes, that.
Yes, some people have electively added plastic to their bodies, but other like for better or worse, a lot of people's bodies just we mostly all have plastic in our bodies. The oceans have plastic. We're so changed by the technologies that we have created that we are, whatever, plastic cybernetics. Like we and that is where I think it's interesting to think about space and making space, because maybe what we're seeing is, depending on how we define the human species, is that humans are becoming many species right now.
I like that. Yeah, I agree.
And the other thing that came to mind when you were talking about this and going back to this idea of technology and what is technology is, it just made me think about technologies of illusion, which are not just computer technologies. I'm not talking about that narrow definition anymore. I'm talking about all of the technologies of illusion and why they create illusion and for what purpose. Those are, social technologies, cultural technologies. And, when we were up in the northern part of the island, what was it, like a month ago, maybe? I've been thinking about this so much ever since. We were at this place that we don't spend a lot of time in, this like really kind of ritzy, for this island, like shopping area by one of the big resorts. And we went and we had food, and I was like, I can see and I can feel like how soothing it is to be in this environment, and how much it tells this story without explicitly telling it, that like there was nobody here before. Like that it makes the process of colonization and occupation that has occurred here invisible, right? That is a technology. If we're really expanding our definition of technologies. And so particularly with now the way that, again, quote unquote, artificial intelligence and image creation and voice reproduction and just all of these things, the line between illusion and reality, which already was very thin, to some like even more thin in the online space, has become nearly non-existent in the online space. And so there's something about that piece and how we make space for, how can we learn to see illusion? How can we learn to see through illusion? I think that will actually create a lot more understanding of what technology is. Because when we have this narrow scope of technology, I think it actually makes it easier to make the rest of the illusions invisible to people. Right? Like, oh,
it's just normal life.
Or like these things just happen. There's nothing, there's no like maleficent force behind these things. And I'm like, I'm here to tell you, and I think we've talked about this before, that like plastic surgeons pay money to apps that change your appearance because they know they'll make money if people feel a lot of dysphoria about how they look when they look in the mirror, right? People are not stupid. They understand how things work. What was it called? Cambridge Analytica. Like there's so many examples. So does that answer your question? I don't even remember what your question
I know I love it, because I think there's two things I want to talk about. There's always two things. One of the things is this kind of stepping into, I guess you could say, the different illusions. It's almost like, remember back when we were young, Frogger, boop, 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 you're trying to get across the cars and the log, and then you finally get in. And I kind of feel like,
I mean, I pretty much sucked at that game, but yes.
I loved it. I was pretty good. I was okay.
More of a Carmen Sandiego.
Oh yeah, you're younger than I am. But there was a Carmen Sandiego game. I don't even know that one.
Yeah, but it was like very old. Like it was like when I was in grade school.
Okay, I don't.
It wasn't like a
I had
video game.
Oregon
like
Trail.
It was like that era.
Oh, I loved Oregon Trail. Anyways, I died a lot in Oregon.
Like Clues. And
Clues. I think I remember it. Oh, yeah.
Like where in the world, where in time.
Oh, okay. I think I remember it now. Yeah, there's some
green letters.
We didn't have it. Someone else did. Okay, so now you know how old we are. So I have this very distinct image, other than the Frogger one, of people, how they interact and I started really observing it when I worked in restaurants in San Francisco, and one of the places that I worked in was surrounded by like tech startups. And I started to see it there. And then I started to see it also just in conversations with people more recently, when, as I've stepped into kind of teaching Indigenous ways and in a return to nature, and it was just like how people who are so in, like a lot of programmers, or who are surrounded by technology, like what I observed in San Francisco is like they didn't even know. Like, I remember a programmer, or I thought he was a programmer, I don't know, bumping into a wall over and over. Like he couldn't program himself around it. He was trying to get to the restroom, and I was just like, is this a glitch in the matrix, or is this person? And finally, like, it dawned on them that what was in front of them was real. Like they couldn't like program around. So I kind of want to talk about like how is it that we talk about, and then this other person was, we were having a conversation about nature, and they're like, yeah, I like to go out on the weekends and hike. But the way that they were talking about nature was very much like they were playing a game, like, I have access to this. I go do this. I fly in. I have my adventure trail. And so I kind of want to start to talk about like how people are interacting, or how they interact in one arena, and they think that the rest of the world plays by the same rules.
I want to ask you a question first, because I think it'll help guide me.
Sure.
Because I can go off in a lot of different directions.
Mhm.
What is your like goal with this particular podcast series around technology?
One of the reasons for this series is to explore technology, explore our definition of it, our use of it, how we interact with it, how it has created a state of consciousness that people sometimes are stuck, as you said, in different illusions, and how it has created this idea of universality of how to act and treat and receive and to do, that it's become its own culture. And I feel like many people who are coming into Indigenous circles, not only do you have to deal with the fact that you are probably a colonizer, but one of the other hard things to deal with is part of that colonization is technology, and how it's created, as you said, a species of people that, because they have so easy access to anything, that they just take, and that they interact with nature just as something that they can purchase or have. And if it comes, again, like, I was reading in marketing, no matter what the product is, if it's nicely packaged, it could be a horrible product, they'll keep buying it. Yet if you get something from like, that maybe doesn't have the correct packaging, but is the real thing, right? The real thing, they won't enjoy it. That there's this whole illusion, and part of it is technology has created this conversation of sameness and a conversation of colonization and consumerism, that people think that everyone exists and they should have access to everything. And so it becomes really challenging, I think, to cross that part of the bridge, because not a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah. I remember us having a conversation about this, actually. I don't remember why, but I remember we were talking about one of the circles, either one that we co-facilitate or one that you facilitate, and to not underestimate how much people connect uniformity with value, right? Because manufacturing, standardized manufacturing, and what you're describing have become so ubiquitous and connected to value, with the exception of potentially like very high cost, custom made stuff that's a little bit more like a luxury item, particular types of luxury items, but not all luxury items. There is such a through thread between value, things being seen as valuable, as worthwhile, and and the emotional response that evokes in people when they're like buying or consuming or engaging with something or someone, and a lack of value when there's something that is, it's not the same, it's not polished, it's not mass manufactured. It's, there's something that is interesting there, because that is a huge departure from how things used to be made for the majority of human history. And at the same time, it overlaps with this like need to be a part of something that is shared. And so in a funny way, it's like a total departure from how the world works, right? A total departure from animism, which dominated the majority of human history. People believed that, you know, in animism, that many things had life and spirit and energy and agency and power, right? That there is a departure from animism, and there's a departure from a part of humanness, but at the same time, this very basic aspect of humanness is being leveraged, pressed. In, are you in, or are you out? Are you in, or are you dead? Are you cool, or are you out in the cold and starving and alone, and you are the pariah and you're not allowed in the community because, you know, you didn't have money to upgrade your iPhone this year. And even though nobody's going to say anything and act like we don't value these things, in reality, like, we notice, right? And we feel better potentially. So the reason I wanted to ask you that question is because I think there's a lot of really valuable conversations to have about technology, but I also think that like it's so huge. It's so big. And it intersects every part of who we are as a species and where we're going. I've heard this really interesting statistic. I can't remember. It was from either a research study that was done. I'll try to find it so you can put it in the show notes potentially. But it was quoted on another podcast called The Emerald, which is a fantastic podcast, really interesting, talked about AI and how like 50% of the top people working in AI believe there's a significant possibility that it could lead to the end of our species. But yet we keep going, you know? And when I think about what you were just saying, that this is a hurdle or a challenge that people bring with them into circles, I think it's even more invisible, because if you are not in the online space, specifically, especially, then you're living a life that maybe has a different texture to it, right? But that also means that that texture is not a part of the online world. And so the story becomes very narrow in certain spaces, right? I've watched this in the online like entrepreneurial world, the stories about what success is like and what it takes to build a business and all of these things. And, you know, because there are only certain types of people who have the time and access to put their experiences online, that becomes the only story. And so all the other stories that are occurring cease to exist in the online space. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally following this. I've bajillion amount of thoughts happening right now.
And so I think that is it's another way that this kind of like illusion of sameness occurs without, maybe, even though it seems obvious to say it, people don't often think about it that way. Like, well, maybe the reason that we don't have tons of stories of what it's like to build several businesses while trying to steward land, while trying, and I don't mean steward land like I bought it and I have a bunch of people do all the work for me. I mean steward land like you have to go out and put your hands in the dirt and get a pickaxe and remove invasive species, and you're exhausted at the end of the day and your body is broken by it sometimes. Those stories don't make it online as much because people don't have time. Or because when you do certain things, your interest in the online space and the conversations that are being had and the limitations of the medium may change, you know? And I know lots of people that have been like, I just saw a post earlier that was like, I feel like they were saying how they used to like care about, they had lots of things to say that felt meaningful. And then like at some point it just felt like it didn't matter anymore. Like what am I even going to bother saying here? You know? And that only strengthens the illusion of sameness. And so one of the things that I like, you know, this past year and a half has been like kind of a wild ride for me. And there was a distinct part of it where I pulled way back from the online space. And I had a different relationship from it than you did, because I think you don't engage with as many like social groups and stuff. I know. Look at that face. I get it. But at a certain point, I felt like my brain was leaking out of my ears.
I think I saw it.
No, it was awful. I just felt like I was getting stupider, like a lot dumber, because there was no space for real intellectual conversations. Everything was just super dumbed down. I don't think that's a very appropriate phrase, but that's the best one I can come up with.
Streamlined or basic.
Streamlined is a very kind way. That's like saying the online space is aerodynamic. Sure. It's aerodynamic because everything is stupid. Anyway, so I had to step back. And the thing that I really noticed was when I did find these little glimmers of like conversations that were different, that made me feel more alive again. It made me feel less like stressed. I felt my body relax. And I think that diversity of story is very challenging to find in the online space. So, long story short, it almost is never a short story with me, just so you people know. Everybody knows by now who knows me, but whenever I see a medium get so, what is it, homogenous?
Homogenized.
I always look for the threads that are different, because there's never just one story. So if all you're seeing is one story, if there's a sameness occurring, not just in the words, but in the feel, the story that it's telling, there's so many ways that it has become one big illusory story, which many people are very aware of. Like, people are not idiots about this. There are so many hilarious accounts on Instagram and TikTok that are basically making fun of this exact reality, right? I just found one the other day that was like aspiring housewife of Instagram, and it's this white guy like pretending to be a, you know, mom blogger, and he just is perfect at it. Like, he nails every single aspect of it, including the like false modesty, and just like perfect. And it's like, it's not like people don't see it, but in a weird way, like everybody's playing along. And that's the part that makes me confused, frankly, because I think everybody sees it and is playing along. And then I get confused and I'm like, do you guys really not see this? Because then when people get really upset when like things are fake, or, you know, people have bad ethics, or they're doing it for profit, or like the reality of a place isn't what it really looks like, or I don't know, all of these different hilarious and sometimes horrible online, things that unfold. And I'm like, okay, I thought we were all just playing along and all knew that this was all mostly BS. And then I'm maybe not, or maybe we did, but we still didn't like the illusion being shattered. I don't know. What do you do you think what do you think is happening there? Because I think it's funny that people think the illusion
I think people, I mean, comedy's such a beautiful genre of commentary, and we want to be entertained. And so I think what happens is that when people are able to create entertainment of what we think is every day, it just kind of falls into that. I don't think people question it as much. It's just like, oh, yeah, that's my life, and I get to laugh at it. So I don't think,
you don't think they see the illusion.
no, no, I don't. But since we're speaking about illusions and creations of reality, let's continue along this, but shift a little bit in gears, and let's talk about dream technology. You and I have a class coming up starting mid-October, and we're going to be going 7 weeks of pretty broad strokes, because dreams and dream technology is a very, 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 very big topic. But let's talk about how a little behind the scenes of what we've been talking about that we're bringing to this class. And I think it's perfect since we've been talking about illusions and creation and reality, is like, what is dreams? How do you interpret dreams? Again, this idea of sameness coming from one colonized direction of what dreams should be versus, a broader scope of dreaming that is anthropological and has been proven to be anthropological. And the social sciences believe in it, but also how that then gets in and steps into how we have to create our own language, or it's almost our own books of technology as it relates to our creation of whatever we're creating.
You just opened a whole interesting question in my mind, because I wasn't sure we were going to go here, but now I'm wondering, like, how has dreaming changed
Yeah.
since computers,
Yeah,
since I mean, certainly there's tons of people doing studies about like the effects of blue light on sleep cycles, and darkness, lack of darkness on sleep cycles. There's this whole Instagram I follow, I think it's called The Anatomy of Night or something. And when I was in grad school, I was got to talk to somebody who was doing their PhD on the effects of blue light on human health and well-being and everything. I was like, really messed up, profound. But yeah, expanding this conversation about technology and illusion and delusion and creation, I think in an interesting way, it's becoming even more confusing now for people. Like, what is reality and what is not reality? Which maybe there is something humbling and positive about that. Because when we talk about dreams, when you and I have been talking about dreams, part of the conversation has been about helping people learn their own language of their dreams, right? There's so many dream interpretation books, there's websites, there's Psychology Today articles, there's, all sorts of spiritual new age goo goo gaga wah wah fairy airy stuff that you can find on there that's like, if you dream of, having a snake in your bed, like, this is what it means. I don't know why I came up with a snake in the bed. But and yet, when I have worked with my dreams, which I have been a very, very vivid like intense dreamer my whole life. I have long drawn out dreams for almost pretty much most of the night. And I just did a sleep study recently and discovered that I actually sleep very deeply and in dream state the majority of the time that I'm asleep, which is much more than most people, which makes sense why I'm so exhausted in the morning from flying around doing other people's lives or something.
See, you do get to travel, Rose.
I know, I know. Don't be smart with me right now. Don't get any funny ideas. But for me, it's only been like marginally helpful to really use these standardized ways of trying to understand what things mean, especially because particularly like when I go into a therapy session and I'm talking about the fact that like a volcano is going to erupt and they're like, oh, let's talk about the metaphor. And I'm like, no, the volcano is going to erupt soon. It's not a metaphor. Like this is going to happen. I could tell because I've spent enough time working in my dreams to most of the time feel the difference between something that's more like an oracular dream, like a forecasting dream, versus like working out my personal material from the daydream, versus I feel like I'm living somebody else's life dream. You know, there's so many different types. And what I'm really curious to see in our class is where we go with the question that you just talked about, where we start to dissolve in our own understanding the barrier that exists between dreams, reality, hallucination, delusion, creation, existence, physical reality, you know, where those things really end. It's very like quantum physics-y, but it's also very much indigenous technology. Mm-hmm. And I've been reading tons of books. Lately, seems like all my books, or a lot of them, have been about like Australian indigenous technologies, beliefs, understandings, and worldviews, and then also some like South America. And there's so much about the boundaries between different states of consciousness and creation, and even understanding what state of consciousness we are in right now, that is like hard to understand from a Western perspective. And when I'm reading it and how I'm imagining our class is going to be too, and then I'll wrap up my answer, but this part I think is going to be really cool, is like when you listen to something and you notice yourself grappling to understand it, and noticing that the work is actually to just relax that tendency, not to understand, because you're not going to understand it by grappling with it and turning it over and over in your mind. It's more going to like be this interesting process of osmosis over time, where something slowly finds its way into like your cells and your bones and your body and this inner knowing, but it's not going to be through the intellect, because there's no way for certain concepts to make sense in the Western colonized mind. Yeah. They just will never make sense. Yeah. So until there's something that just like seeps in and like physically decolonizes some of the structures of your body, somehow, and the knowing that arises from that, I don't think people will be able to grasp it. So it'll be an interesting experiment to do, I think.
You know, as you're speaking about this and kind of relating to, you know, people always want to know exactly what their dreams are about. You know, what does it mean? And then they Google it, and as you said, the snake in the bed.
Or my favorite that I see people do all the time, which I think is sort of hilarious.
Will you have coffee with me?
You wish. is they'll go online and just ask, like, a huge group of people.
God, I can't believe people do
I just dreamed about a snake. I just dreamed about a wasp. What does it mean? And I'm just like, it's literally like you're not even going into the fortune teller's tent. You're literally at the fucking circus and you just are like, hey, circus people, what? Tell me my future. And you're just going to take whatever answer somebody gives you. Half of those circus people don't even work at the circus, number one. Most of them are not fortune tellers. They don't know shit about shit. And you are just literally letting them tell you about the most intimate aspect of your own, like, unconscious or potentially oracular, or a message that was from your ancestors. I don't even understand. I get it because people are desperate, but like,
Yeah, well, the problem is that they open up the door, and that's a whole nother conversation.
I think it's one that needs to be had, though.
We'll have it definitely in our class. But one of the things that, as you were talking about, right, and relating it back to, people looking up the symbolism of things, right? One of the reasons that indigenous technologies, indigenous teachings, a lot of it is oral, because a lot of it was destroyed, but it continued in the oral tradition because there was this knowledge, right, that things change, grow, and evolve. And part of when you enter into an indigenous space and start talking about technology and dreams and things like that, when you ask someone, and you say, again, well, I get snake is strong, it must be Quetzalcoatl. Since it is, our class is dreaming with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent.
I know, it's not an accident.
And you look up this idea, someone somewhere one day put something down in paper and then everyone copied it.
Literally, you can literally go to different, if you Google like interpretation of dreams, you will see word for word on different websites. It's not even like partially copied.
And so then people just become then the expert because they grasp it and they know it and they move on. Yet when we are in indigenous circles, we teach relationship. And so if people have not spent time with snakes, they don't even know, like so many people don't even know animals' natural habitats, right? They haven't engaged, or they're scared of snakes, or they have these ideas and these stories. When you enter into indigenous spaces, a lot of the messages, right, in dream world, as you said, get lost because people do not have relationship to environment and to the environment of where these symbols are showing up in relationship to what's happening. And so what happens is, it's a copy and paste interpretation of a dream that you said, we can't, again, unless you can wake up uncolonized, that would be amazing, right? You're going.
It might be really painful.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, amazing too, but also.
Probably like my back every morning. No, but.
Why your back hurts every morning? You're just getting a little more uncolonized every day, and you're like, this hurts. I hate this.
But I think that's going to be an important part of this class is just, if you're coming in with this expectation of like, I'm going to walk away knowing exactly what all my dreams say or what this symbol means. A symbol could mean different because if you ancestrally come from different people, that's still in you. That is still in dream time. That passing on of the ancestors, right? Snake to me will be very different to snake to you and your people. And so, again, we can't just have sameness. We can't just have a copy and paste. This is what your dream is, and now you've conquered it, and now you've moved on. We're going to work with how we create reality, how we create dreams, how we believe, what we believe in. All of that will be part of this technology. Again, if you listen to the first episode, go back as we talk about what technology means. And one part of it said, literally, the thought that became something, something to that degree. And so we will be playing with that idea of what it means to create, for you to create your own interpretation. But again, I think I've been really enjoying our conversation. I mean, I enjoy all our conversations. Well, most of them. But I know most of them, 90% of them. But I'm super excited about that. Anything else that you want to talk about dream wise?
One thing I will say is, and one of the reasons I'm excited to be teaching this class is because I love being a dreamer.
Yeah.
I mean, it is such a rich part of my human experience.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating and wild and incredible that we just like take it for granted that there were these funny little creatures that like, you know, at a certain point in the day, we just have to lay down and close our eyes. And when we do that, crazy things happen in our minds, or like we leave our bodies, or, you know, all of these different kind of understandings of what happens when we dream and when we're asleep. And because I did the sleep study and they had this like video of like, this is what's going to happen. And they stick all these sensors on you. I was watching this really outdated, hilarious video. That's like their instructional video about it. Saw this little, you know, this like funny man like laying down. And I was just like, what funny little creatures we are, you know? And how funny that like if, you know, aliens came and they were like, observing us, and you know, it's just
I
like
mean, they're here, right?
whatever. Aliens in my story, they
story.
arrive,
Yeah.
right? So whatever, take it for what it's worth, whether they're here or not, it doesn't matter. It's a story, Marita. It's a mental exercise.
Got it.
That like not everything in the universe dreams potentially in the way that we do,
The way that we do, yeah.
right? It's different. And
Yeah, it's a
I think
consciousness.
I love that part of my life. I love that I am a deep dreamer. I love that I've had these wild, long, arduous adventures in my dreams, that I've been other people, that I've been a terrorist, and I've woken up feeling the guilt of that terrorist for participating in something harmful, that I've had all these different human experiences. I've had all these different fantastical experiences. And it's not something that everybody has. Like, not everybody dreams or remembers their dreams to the same degree. And I think for those people that I know who are very deep dreamers, or, you know, your dreams are sometimes different than mine. Like you get a lot of work done in your dreams. Like you have a lot of like ancestors and teachers visit you, you know.
I visit people.
Right. So like not everybody has the same type of dreams. And I just think that that is such a rich part of being a human being. It's like I was in a circle a while ago, and I remember they were asking like, what's one thing you love about, you know, something you love about your human experience, like that you wouldn't want to give up. And I was like, I love having relationships with non-human creatures. It's so rich to me to be able to be a human being that gets to have relationships with with things that are not human. And it would be so strange to me to not have that, you know? And people were like, really? Wow, interesting. That's what you picked. And I'm like, yeah, because think about it. Like you have these cross species communication and connection and relations. And to me, dreaming is like that. It's like this really amazing part of being a human being that in some ways I think we take for granted, you know, like as a species, right? How much do people put a lot of emphasis on their dreams, but do we really value? Like, what if suddenly human beings couldn't dream anymore? What would happen? What if one day everybody fell asleep and everybody woke up in the morning and there was nobody had any dreams?
One dream to dream.
What would happen to humanity?
I think it would disappear.
I think there's these pieces that we sometimes like underestimate how profoundly important they are to our experience and to our species and to our essence, to our souls, to our spirits, to our imagination, to the capacity that we have to experience things beyond ourselves, So for whatever reason, I just wanted people to know that. Like, I think that is going to be a beautiful part of this class. I think that there's so much we're going to cover that's going to be really practical. I love talking to other dreamers. I love helping other dreamers who potentially have outgrown or sort of felt unsatisfied at a certain point by like just Googling stuff online or going to your therapist and having them figure out what the metaphor is, going either, Jungian or Freudian, it doesn't matter, depending on the era. Probably going to be disappointed either way if you are like an oracular dreamer or somebody who dreams about family members or whatever. I think that this class is going to be a really good opportunity for people to come and do something that is more deeper, that is more personal, that's more relational, that's definitely going to put you on a path to understanding. Not immediately, not completely, not overnight, but being in a deeper relationship with your dreams.
So we hope that you join us. I hope that you enjoy this conversation and several more that we will have. But dreaming as technology, the creation and relationship that we have to reality, to how we've constructed stories of sameness, and how we can start to really decipher how we are interacting with our technology of dreams, dream time, and creation. Thank you, Rose. Yes.
And perhaps that these dreams are one of the things that is keeping us from being swallowed by that sameness.
Yeah. And on that perfect note, we will end it. Thank you so much, Rose. Always a pleasure of having you back. And we hope to see you all in the circle. If you're enjoying this podcast, thank you so much for the people listening around the world. We'd love for you to become a Patreon to help keep this podcast going. Remember, when you contribute and donate to Indigenous voices, you are helping heal the wound and help with reparations. Once again, it is with deepest gratitude that I bow to you for joining me on this podcast, this episode, this circle, this plática, this meditation, this remembering. I hope that you have stayed curious. I hope to see you in the circle again next week. So make sure that you like or follow. Until then, may you be blessed with abundance of peace and radical self-love.